Hello everyone, welcome to Drishti IAS. This is the NCERT Foundation series wherein we cover the subject of political science or polity with the help of MCQs and PYQs. Now today we'll be discussing on the topic of constitution. This is mostly a factual topic and we'll discuss it just at a very surface level, just as much as your NCERTs have covered it. At least this class 9 NCERT has covered it. Yesterday we discussed the topic of democracy, so along similar lines we'll also study the topic of constitution today with the help of MCQs, and there are also a couple of PYQs that I have brought for you. Now without further ado, let's plunge right in. So let's begin with the previous day question. The strongest argument in favor of democracy is that it ensures A. Economic prosperity, B. Dignity and equality of citizens, C. Absence of corruption, and D. Efficiency in decision making. Does it ensure economic prosperity? No, it doesn't ensure. Does it aspire for economic prosperity? Yes, democracy does aspire for it, but it cannot ensure economic prosperity. And as an example, we can compare India and China. Now, India is democratic and China is not a democracy. Yet, the GDP of China is much higher than India's. So no, it cannot ensure economic prosperity. Dignity and equality of citizens, yes, it does ensure dignity and equality of citizens. How? Dignity by giving them the right to political participation by means of giving them the right to vote. This is the bare minimum. Of course, we also give them fundamental rights, right? So, and other forms of rights. But this is the bare minimum. And equality, of course, we have the entire right to equality in the constitution. But other than that, simply in terms of democracy as a form of government, if we give their vote, every person's vote is given equal value, then we see that dignity and equality of citizens is ensured. C, absence of corruption. We can consider the case of India, and you can judge this for yourself. And D, efficiency in decision making. Now recall that in the preceding section we discussed, or in the preceding session we discussed that because of the involvement of multiple stakeholders, democracies often experience delay in decision making. Now this doesn't seem like efficiency to me. Okay, so with this you can easily rule out. So we have the correct answer, which is option number B. Now let's move on to the first question for today, which is based on the constitution. Which of the following best explains the need for a constitution in a democracy? Now right off the bat, in the previous session we had discussed that in a democracy we do need a constitution. Why? So that we can keep the power of the ruling party in check in order to provide limitations to the power of the ruling party, the ruling government. That is why we need a constitution. Okay, this is right off the bat, very, very fundamental. Now, A option says it ensures economic prosperity for citizens. Constitution would definitely aim for economic prosperity for citizens, as you can see via your fundamental rights or your DPSPs, where certain aspirations are laid down, but it cannot guarantee economic prosperity. It ensures that this prosperity or economic justice of some sort is definitely an aspiration. It ensures that citizens can aspire for this, but it cannot ensure that every citizen is economically prosperous. B, it lays down rules for trust, power distribution, and citizen rights. Absolutely. This actually derives from here. Now, if I know that my ruler has certain limitations to their power, will I have trust in that government? Yes, I will. Also, let's see what exactly constitution means. Okay. Now, before we explain this point, let's try and understand what exactly, and again in a very basic sense, is the meaning of constitution. Now, think about India. Think about what is our constitution. Clearly, constitution is the supreme law within a territory. Yes, it is a supreme law within a country. It is a set of, sometimes written, sometimes not, but it is a set of principles and laws that govern the relationship between citizens of a country. Yeah. So whenever we talk about different communities, we have so many communities, so many castes, and every community and every caste follows the same set of laws. It has the same constitution. There is no separate constitution for different communities. Hence, supreme set of principles to govern the relationships between citizens, as well as to govern the relationship between these citizens and their rulers. Okay. So let's talk about fundamental rights. The biggest check on the rulers and the biggest example of the supreme law of a nation governing that relationship between the citizens and the rulers. The state cannot be tyrannical thanks to the constitution. All right. So if we move back to our question, it lays down rules for trust, power distribution, and citizen rights. Yes, this explains the need for a constitution. See, it guarantees that majority rule is always absolute. No, it does not. See, democracy does function on the principle of majority rule. But just so that that rule does not become absolute or it does not have unlimited power, we need a constitution to check this. So no. And D, it replaces all existing laws immediately. No, this is not the need for a constitution. This is not why we need a constitution. If we have to replace some laws, we can amend them, we can create new laws, and of course, not all existing laws will be replaced immediately. So we can arrive at the answer, which is option number B. Now let's quickly run through the functions of a constitution. It specifies how government is constituted and who takes decisions. Yes, it does specify how government is constituted, right? So let's see, if you're talking about this particular, our own constitution. So we know that when we are talking about how the government is constituted, we are talking about elections. We're also talking about whether the government is going to be parliamentary or whether it's going to be presidential. What is going to be the structure? Is it going to be federal or not? Is it going to be unitary? Right? So all these things are discussed where exactly? What is the root of all these things? It is the constitution. It specifies how the government is constituted, whether it's going to be presidential, whether elections are going to take place with what intervals and everything, okay? And who takes decisions, of course, right? Expresses aspirations of people for a good society. So enough about talking about laws and rules. Of course, we are talking about laws and rules when we're talking about the supreme law of the nation, but it also expresses vision and the aspirations of people. Let's say vision of a just society. Okay. Now think about it. Think about our preamble. It talks about liberty, right? Equality. What is all of that? It is the aspirations of the people, fraternity, unity. That is what we want, or a constitution, or all citizens of a nation would aspire to be, to have a just society. Generates trust and coordination for diverse people. Like I said, multiple communities, multiple castes, multiple religions reside in our territory. If we all know that we are subject to the same law, then there is predictability and then there is trust. If I know that I will not be favored over another person, or another person will not be favored over me by virtue of community, caste, race, or any other thing you can think of, then I will have trust not only in the party, in the ruling government, but also amongst people themselves. So yes, trust building is a very important function and a very important need for the Constitution. And the last one is very frequently discussed, and we've also discussed it very straightforwardly in the beginning of the lecture as well as in the preceding lecture, that it lays down the limits on government powers and defines citizens' rights. Which statement regarding the Constituent Assembly of India is correct? Now, what was the Constituent Assembly of India? See, before the Britishers left India and before they endowed full freedom to India, they decided to set up a Constituent Assembly in order to frame a constitution, frame some laws for the country. Okay? And this assembly developed our constitution in 114 days spread over 3 years, from 1946 to 1949. Okay, now let's see step by step or one by one what exactly transpired. It was directly elected by all adult citizens of India. Right off the bat, could it have been directly elected by all adult citizens of India? Do you think there was universal adult franchisee back then in 1946? No. So how it was elected was that the provincial legislatures, the members there, they had elected indirectly the members of this Constituent Assembly. So the members of the Constituent Assembly were indirectly elected. There was no direct election back then. B, it was dominated by the Congress but included representatives of many groups and ideologies. That is correct. It was indeed dominated by the Congress, but it is also true that it did represent people from diverse socio-economic backgrounds and ideologies. So this is correct. C, it functioned for about 1 year before adopting the Constitution. No, we've just discussed it functioned for at least 3 years before the final Constitution, the final form of the Constitution was adopted. And D, its members were all appointed by the British government. No, also wrong. Some members were appointed, some members were elected indirectly. So we have the correct answer, which is option number B. Question 3, the Indian Constitution was adopted on blank and came into effect on blank. Now, this is a very, very simple question. I think all of us know this. It was adopted on 26 November 1949 and it came into effect on January 26, 1950, which is also celebrated every year as our Republic Day. So before we move ahead, let me draw your attention to the NCERT online course for your UPSC foundation. This course will provide you 150 plus classes with access for 2 years to these classes. And if you purchase this course and visit any of our centers like Lucknow, Jaipur, Indore, Prayagraj, Noida or Karol Bagh for an IAS GS foundation classroom course, you will receive a full fee waiver, that is amounting equal to the amount that you've paid for the NCERT online course. If you want more details, you can please click the link in the description or you could call 87501. The preamble of the Indian Constitution does not include which of the ideals originally? Now, we have liberty, republic, secular, and justice. So let's try to see what exactly is contained in the preamble of the Indian Constitution. Now it says, we the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens. This part is not in the preamble. This I've just written for your understanding. Justice, social, economic, and political. This is there. Liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. Equality of status and of opportunity. Fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. In our Constituent Assembly, this 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact, and give to ourselves this Constitution. Now, this is not the original Constitution in the sense that the original Constitution only had sovereign, democratic republic. The original Constitution only had sovereign, democratic republic. And these two terms, socialist and secular, were added to the Constitution in 1976 by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So the original Constitution did not have the term socialist. It did not have the term secular, and these were added during the amendment of 1976, which is the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. Okay, and not just this, the term integrity, wherein we write unity and integrity, the term integrity was also added by this very same Constitutional Amendment Act, which incidentally is also known as, what is it known as? The mini constitution. Now, this is a very interesting chapter, a very interesting topic in itself, but this we'll cover in subsequent sessions. We will not be dealing with this now. We'll only deal with very, very basic questions at the moment. Okay. So now let's go back to our question. We are talking about does not include originally. Liberty, it does. Republic, it does. Justice, it does. Secular was added in 1976 via the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. And for simplicity's sake, we can simply remember that this act, this mini constitution, added 3 words, which was socialist, secular, and integrity. So this is going to be very useful for you. Okay. Which one of the following objectives is not embodied in the preamble to the Constitution of India? Now, this is a PYQ that was asked in 2017. I think it was question number 38 or 48. I'm really not sure, but it was I think it was question number 38 in your set A of your 2017 paper. And like I said, simple question, very much covered from your NCERT. Now again, it talks about which of these is not. Please focus on the word not embodied in the preamble. We just took a look at the preamble. It talks about liberty of thought, belief, and expression, right? Also worship. But does it talk about economic liberty? It doesn't. If we go back, thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. Nowhere has it talked about economic liberty. Okay? It's talked about justice. It has talked about economic justice, but not about economic liberty. Now, this is a very simple question if you remember your preamble very correctly, but also some of us may get confused simply by virtue of the fact that the preamble does talk about economic justice. Okay, so we have our answer, which is option B. Why did the framers of the Indian Constitution include provisions for constitutional amendments? Now, what are constitutional amendments and why have these provisions been included? So, see, whenever I frame a constitution, whenever a constitution is framed, you would want the constitution to be amendable, because as society changes, as time progresses, you cannot have certain laws that were valid in the past and you cannot expect those laws to be equally applicable to the present. Okay? So, of course, amendability, again, also it might so be the case that there can be some error in decision making, and this may contribute to the rectification of that error. Okay? Now, A, to make the constitution sacred and unalterable. No. If I had to make it sacred and unalterable, why would I introduce the idea of amendment at all? Then I would not introduce the very concept of constitutional amendment. Clearly, our forefathers were not thinking of making it sacred and the word of God. Okay? B, to allow flexibility in response to changing social needs. This is precisely how the founding fathers of the constitutions were thinking. They were thinking way ahead of their time. They knew that as society progresses, in the next coming years, 50 years, 100 years, different laws would be needed. And you have to send me an example of such a law in the comment section. Very interesting, very important. Okay. C, to let the judiciary alone decide on all constitutional changes. No, then the parliament would be redundant. If judiciary alone had to keep deciding on everything, then we would not need other organs of democratic functioning. All right. D, to make frequent and easy changes to the political system. No. This was, it looks very tempting as an option, but no. Our members of the Constituent Assembly, the founding fathers of our constitution, were not thinking along these lines, because this would lead to more instability. More instability is not desirable. They wanted more stability. They wanted to balance between stability as well as needs of the changing times. Okay. So this, no, easy changes to the political system. That means today I am functioning in a parliamentary democracy. Tomorrow I'll be functioning in a presidential democracy. I will not be sure whether I have to pay my respects to the president today or to the prime minister today. Of course, I'll be paying my respect to both since I live in India. But let's say if a country was solely a presidential democracy or solely a parliamentary democracy, you would not know what to do next. So this actually leads to instability. So therefore, we'll go with the second option. The correct answer is option B. The mind of the makers of the Constitution of India is reflected in which of the following? Mind of the makers. So if you have to try and figure out what the makers of the Constitution were thinking, they were actually thinking about the aspirations of the people and the vision of a just and fair and prosperous society. Where do we find such a vision? We've just seen that vision just a couple of slides ago, and that was the preamble. All of these are important, but this is actually the philosophy that is reflected here. This is what reflects what our forefathers were actually thinking, their aspirations for all the citizens. And they were actually thinking about providing liberty, justice, fraternity to all the citizens, ensuring liberty, justice, equality and fraternity, unity and integrity to all the citizens. All right. Which of the following influenced the makers of the Indian Constitution? French Revolution, US Bill of Rights, Russian Revolution or Government of India Act 1935? See, if you've read a bit of history, then French Revolution actually did lead to a republican form of government, okay? And it did, the idea of liberty, equality and fraternity actually did come from the French Revolution. Okay? It did come from the French Revolution. So we have definitely borrowed something from the French Revolution. US Bill of Rights. Now, the very word rights here should ring a bell. We have borrowed our fundamental rights from the US Bill of Rights. And borrow does not mean we've taken it as it is. Of course, we have contextualized it. Third, the Russian Revolution. Okay. Now, the Russian Revolution talked about the ideas of classless society. Okay. So, basically, again, emphasis on equality, a bit of socialism. Okay. All of this has been borrowed from the Russian Revolution. Finally, Government of India Act 1935, as you'll go ahead and also study in subsequent sessions and in subsequent chapters of your NCERTs. This was actually essentially a very, very major contributor to the entire structure of the Constitution. It was entirely based on the Government of India Act 1935. Okay. So, the correct answer is all of the above. Option number D, 1, 2, 3 and 4 only. Question 9, which of the following is not a function of the Constitution? So we've really glanced through quickly of what the functions of the Constitution are. So I think we'll be able to figure out which one is not the function of the Constitution. Option A says specifying how the government will be constituted. So I think this the Constitution does. We've discussed this. We discussed that the Constitution specifies how the government is constituted, and we discussed various ways in which the government can be constituted, be it parliamentary form of government or the presidential form of government, and so on and so forth. B, laying down citizen rights, of course, and that is the most basic thing. Citizen rights explains the need for a constitution in the first place. C, guaranteeing economic prosperity to all citizens. Like we said, we are steering clear of words like guaranteeing. No, we are talking about economic justice in the Constitution that we are aspiring to get, but not guaranteeing. Okay. And D is setting limit on government powers. Again, a very fundamental, very basic explanation for the need of a constitution. So from here, we are talking about which of them is not a function. C is your correct answer because this is not a function of the Constitution. Hence, answer is option number C. Moving on to the last question. Which of the following best reflects the philosophy of the Indian Constitution as stated in the preamble? Now let's go through the options. A, it provides a legal framework for government functioning only. Notice the word only. Does it only provide a legal framework for government functioning? No. We discussed that the preamble actually reflects the aspirations not only of the founding fathers of the constitutions, but also of the people, the citizens of the country. It sets out the basic values and guiding principles of the Constitution. Yes, of course, it does. This actually is what the preamble in essence does. See, it lays down the entire administrative machinery in detail. So when we are talking about philosophy reflecting in the Constitution, can we actually say that it's about administrative machinery? No, philosophy and administrative machinery do not quite go together. And finally, option D, it is a historical document without contemporary relevance. It's not a historical document. It has contemporary relevance, and it will always have relevance. It will always be relevant because it talks about fundamental values, very fundamental values like liberty, equality, fraternity, justice, unity, and integrity. These are timeless values. Okay, they are not relevant only to a particular time or a particular era, but these are timeless values. So before we end this session, I'd like to draw your attention to the NCERT online course. Once again, the admissions are open. Please feel free to enroll for the course. It will give you 150 plus classes to explain your basic NCERTs to you thoroughly, concepts and facts, building on them step by step, and it is valid for 2 years. Now, if you enroll in this NCERT online program and visit any of our offline physical centers, then if you get yourself enrolled in the IAS GS Foundation Classroom course, then rest assured that you will receive a full fee waiver of the NCERT online course fee. If you want more details, please click the link in the description or call 87501-87501. And now it's time for today's practice question. Which of the following pairs is correctly matched? A. Motilal Nehru, the chairman of the drafting committee. B. Rajendra Prasad, president of the Constituent Assembly. C. Sarojini Naidu, first defense minister of India. Or D. B.R. Ambedkar, first prime minister of India. You have to tell me which of these options are correct and send these correct options, send your answers in the comment section. I hope you found this session useful. If you did indeed find this session useful, please like, share and subscribe. We'll meet you again with a new topic and new questions. Thanks for watching.
अब एग्जाम की तैयारी को और बेहतर करने के लिए हमारे चैनल को लाइक, शेयर और सब्सक्राइब करना ना भूलें।